And thank you also to Dr. Supriya for sharing the findings of the report in such great detail with us. There were just two thoughts listening to the findings of the report, and I can't resist from sharing those. And very ironically, both of them are two movies that somehow comes to mind while hearing the report. One is Gamana, a 1978 Muzaffar Ali film, which in some senses very clearly looked into the futility of urban migration. It was, of course, male migration, and from UP to Bombay, and taxi driver. But there's this really amazing poster of Gamana, which has Smita Patil literally on the cusp of the Ghar and the Bahir, which is what the title clearly is, of work. The other is a 2014, it's called a Bangla language film, but it actually didn't have any dialogue. It is called Asha Jawar Majhe, Labor of Love. And it deals with a woman who works in a handbag factory and a man who works in a printing press. And they have different shifts. And there's only one little bit of time where their coming and going into their home, into their domestic space overlaps. And it's just that everyday routine which is being shown in this film. And you actually, in some senses, really understand, I suppose, questions of isolation and alienation that you talked about, that comes deeply through this particular research. Going to the question that Indrani has posed, I think I'll go through few documents through which we can see this correlation between women's issues and labor issues coming together historically. And one of the first documents in this context is actually the 1938 subcommittee on women that was established by the National Planning Committee. The report was titled Women's Role in Planned Economy, and it was a report that came into being in 1947. A very less talked about report, and yet we have Professor Nirmala Banerjee writing about it, and also Professor Maitri Chaudhuri writing about it. And I'm kind of looking at both of their writings around this report, in which the report said, I'll quote two portions from it. Number one is the trade unions should accept the principle of equality between men and women and recognize the individual as the unit. And the second thing that this report said was that this homework, which is domestic work, mostly by women, though not recognized in terms of money value, is an essential contribution to the social wealth of the state and should be recognized as such. The aggregate of social wealth under planned economy will include all kinds of work, whether rewarded in money value or not. So in some senses, from the very beginning, at least this 1947 report clearly talks about both work outside the home but work inside the home, and how is it that both are complements to each other. In connection to this, very interestingly, in 1946, when a woman member of the Communist Party, Monikuntala Sen, writes in her autobiography, In Search of Freedom, An Unfinished Journey, she's entrusted with the responsibility of organizing jute mill workers in Kolkata, in and around Kolkata. And Monikuntala writes, and I quote, "My task was not just to form women's organizations among working class women. As workers, they had some demands of their own. They were not fully aware of their rights, nor were they kept informed by the trade trade unions. But these women's demands were, number one, equal wages for equal work, number two, maternity allowance, number three, creches and children's schools. And one actually sees that what Monikuntala is saying, which is articulated by these women in the Boj area, in just before independence or at the cusp of independence, is what we see are the three different kinds of legislations that we get, later on. The next is to look at the Towards Equality report of 1974. In its chapter on roles, rights, and opportunities for economic participation, one of the recommendations that the report gives is, in order to eliminate unjust denial of maternity benefits, scrutiny of applications should be done by a committee of the management and trade union representatives, and the trade union representative should preferably include a woman. And this would provide greater incentives to women workers to participate in trade union activities. There was a recommendation of neighborhood creches, working time up to 10 p.m., providing arrangements for transport and security to be made. And again, one sees that it's a 1974 report with these kinds of recommendations, and we are even still today talking about night shifts of women in different professions, and how do we ensure that. The next is the Shram Shakti, a report of the National Commission of Self-Employed Women, 1988, where we see in this report, it says, most of the women of SCs, STs work at subsistence level as agricultural laborers, construction workers, or are engaged in the gathering fuel and fodder and fetching water. Family occupations like agriculture, animal husbandry, forestry, weaving, construction labor, cottage industries, usually the women's contribution is merged with the family and becomes invisible. So women's participation in trade unions has been negligible according to the Shram Shakti report for many reasons, and affects the process of obtaining justice through law. So what I was actually trying to think through these three, which are coming from the moment of independence till just before 1990, are ways in which we are trying to bring together questions of women and questions of labor, but also continuously questions of unionizing is not done as a separate thing. As if women and work and unions go hand in hand at least through all of these reports. More contemporary, a couple of reports to talk about. It says, so number one is a 2016 University of Oxford working paper series, which is called Organizing the Unorganized, Union Membership and Earning in India's Informal Economy. This report, of course, talks about national unions being organized by informal workers in the beery, construction, handloom, fishery, health, transport industries. Also says that some industries have more stronger unions than many other industries. But it does suggest that unions in India tend to be gender segregated, and men and women with the informal workforce are likely to belong to different sorts of unions. And there is a mention of women's unions such as Seva or Working Women's Forum, which expressly recruit and organize poor and low-income women. The other report is United We Stand, Role of Unionization Among the Gig Laborers in India. It's a Mohanirban Calcutta Research Group report, which came out very recently in 2023, where we are starting to probably see questions around harassment-free, decent work conditions, proper commissioning system, proper policy towards workers, delivery partners. Of course, this happens in the urban company context, but the main demands that are written through in this report are, number one, ensuring basic minimum wages for all gig workers, facilitating all social security policies like Provident Fund, ESI, workmen's compensation, and maternity facilities, and finally, separate labor welfare board for gig workers. I'm probably trying to also think that questions of or articulation of social security and articulation of issues related to sexual harassment at the workplace are things that are happening, probably being articulated in the last 10, 15 years much more than it is articulated in the earlier days of, the kind of reports that we are getting. And I'm kind of trying to think that, it probably also speaks to some of the findings that we see in this particular report. Just quickly, one last thing with respect to a very recent research that India Spend did. And they spoke to various women, again, in the platform-based workplace, and where women workers actually said that they are asked to work on weekends. They would work up to 13 hours, which included travel time to customers' homes, locations, providing the requested services. The pressure of maintaining ratings, accepting auto-assigned jobs, having to travel 10 to 15 kilometers at their own expense, and the possibility of last-minute cancellations at the customer's doorstep, leading to loss of earnings were significant problems. We are, of course, seeing a new areas of precarity with respect to workplace that comes in through the question of gig and platform workers.